We've talked on the YouTube channel in the past about Jak and Daxter, this, franchise that's gone on now, and we haven't seen a continuation of it, however, in quite some time. And so we were talking about, will we ever see a continuation of this franchise? But I think in order to really kind of break down and answer that question, we have to look at what happened here to this series, and could we, at some point or another, see a continuation of this franchise in the future. So let's get into it, guys. In an article that was written by Francis Kenna of Game Grim, whatever happened to Jak and Daxter? Jak and Daxter was a franchise with an unusual evolution. While most game franchises use their sequels as a way to iterate upon previous entries, improving and polishing prior ideas and trying to address past criticisms, Jak and Daxter instead went in a completely different direction after its first title, with its sequels having wildly different tones and focusing on different styles of gameplay. So number one, guys, even though I will say this, probably the main reason that we haven't seen a continuation of Jak and Daxter is because Naughty Dog, of course, the developers of this franchise, have been working on none other than The Last of Us 2. They've also, of course, made the Uncharted games, which have been wildly successful. Now, that's not saying that Jak and Daxter is not going to come back at some point in the future, but I think number one is that they're working on other stuff, but number two is simply that they have different tones and they focus on different styles of gameplay within each game, in different variations, of course. And so I think that is another kind of something that's added to the problem that Jak and Daxter may have faced. For the uninitiated, the original Jak and Daxter released in 2001 and was a 3D platformer much in the same vein as Super Mario 64. While Naughty Dog had already proven themselves capable in the platforming genre with the hugely successful Crash Bandicoot franchise, Jak and Daxter proved to be an even more ambitious project, with the linear levels of Crash being replaced with large open areas seamlessly connected through a single world with no loading times. People forget, though, that Naughty Dog was involved in some of these games, guys, like Jak and Daxter as well as Crash Bandicoot. It's a pretty big thing, guys. And then, of course, they took some of those ambitions, which you can totally see now looking back. A lot of those ambitious moments and different styles of gameplay they had in Jak and Daxter, they definitely moved some of that stuff, kind of becoming very ambitious in their more recent games, that being like the Uncharted series and the Last of Us series. The contrast of technology meets nature within the game also helped it to cement its own unique identity amongst the numerous other 3D mascot platformers at the time. The title ended up also showcasing the technical prowess that Naughty Dog has become well known for in recent years, with titles such as the Uncharted franchise and The Last of Us. So, look, at the end of the day, guys, I think that, as I said, Naughty Dog started working on The Last of Us as well as, Uncharted first and then The Last of Us. And so they've kind of gone into this more, realistic direction, semi-realistic direction, and they've, been really focused on character development and things of that nature. Now, of course, each of these games, guys, that's come out, they were, at the time, pretty awesome. I think a lot of people really enjoyed the Jak and Daxter series, and I think that this is a series that deserves to coexist or at least continue at some point or another in the future. But the question is that really something that's going to happen with Naughty Dog not only, of course, doing Uncharted, but now The Last of Us? What is that going to look like if they were to come back to Jak and Daxter? I feel like maybe that kind of ship is sailed. They're done probably with Crash Bandicoot. They're probably done with Jak and Daxter. Will they sell the IP, or what will they maybe do with Jak and Daxter to see this, ever come back? I think that at this point it's in a limbo state at this point, guys, and hopefully we see it come back in some way, shape, or form. Now, despite critical reception remaining strong, sales saw another slight dip, with the Jak and Daxter franchise seemingly losing players' interest. After reaching a satisfying conclusion with the overarching narrative of Jak and Daxter with Jak 3, Naughty Dog decided to follow in the footsteps of Crash Bandicoot and create another spin-off racing game titled Jak X combat racing. If Crash Team Racing's is Naughty Dog's take on Mario Kart, then Jak X would be their take on Twisted Metal. This title finds Jak and his friends entering a combat racing tournament to win an antidote to the poison they've been inflicted with. As the title implies, these races focus on destroying opponents' vehicles with a variety of different weapons as much as they do on fast and efficient driving. So here comes my third thing, guys. Number one is that Naughty Dog started working on other titles that ended up becoming very successful, that being The Last of Us as well as Uncharted. Number two is they had different styles of gameplay within each of these Jak and Daxter games, which I think brings me to number three, is that there was almost like an identity crisis within this franchise, in my personal opinion, because at times, even though it's good at times to kind of try different things, you really want to stick with what you're good at when you're in a specific, in a franchise, right? Whatever's working, you kind of want to continue that and maybe evolve that over time. But going from being what it was to then kind of like a racing game and adding other, variants and such to it, I think at times Jak and Daxter had somewhat of an identity crisis at different points in time. Now, while Ready at Dawn found success with the IP, Naughty Dog would yet again bring the franchise in-house for the second PSP title, Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier. The initial intent was to create the title alongside their 2009 hit Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. However, balancing the two projects ended up becoming more challenging than they had expected, leaving them no choice than to pass the next Jak and Daxter title to High Impact Games. High Impact Games not only consisted of past Naughty Dog and Insomniac employees, but they had seen moderate success with Ratchet & Clank Size Matters and Secret Agent Clank. Unfortunately, that success didn't translate to the 2009 title Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, with the game receiving a more lukewarm reception than any of the previous titles. Despite releasing on both the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation Portable, The Last Frontier failed to attract much of an audience and is generally considered to be the weakest entry in the franchise by fans. Now, this, however, wasn't enough to dissuade Naughty Dog from attempting to take the franchise under their wing one final time. This new PlayStation 3 title was going to be yet another transformation for the ever-evolving franchise, with an even more grounded and gritty approach being taken. Unfortunately, the team behind this new title couldn't quite pin down a tone and direction that they felt was suitable for the franchise. The title became abandoned in the early stages in favor of The Last of Us. So really, guys, as we said in the very beginning, Naughty Dog became very focused on not only Uncharted, but The Last of Us as well. And with good reason. Look, at the end of the day, when you look at the totality of what, Jak and Daxter is, and now you look at the recent work that Naughty Dog is doing, what Naughty Dog is doing currently is really, they're almost cementing a legacy for themselves as one of the best developers in the world when it comes to gaming. And that's aside from, all of the backlash they've gotten about, their process on creating content and things of that nature, guys, which we're not going to get into. But all in all, when you look at what they've done recently with Uncharted and The Last of Us, it's quite spectacular. And so they're making an aggressive approach to be one of the, most talked about and prestigious, developers out there in the world. And Jak and Daxter was a way that they could was a stepping stone for them to get to where they were really trying to do, which was Uncharted and The Last of Us. Now, as of right now, it seems unlikely that Naughty Dog will revisit the Jak and Daxter franchise. And while myself and many others have a soft spot for it, it's hard to blame them. They went on to find greater success with both the Uncharted franchise and The Last of Us, and if they can't decide on a good direction for Jak and Daxter, it may be better off being left alone. I just hope that if the series ever does return and can recapture the sense of focus and identity it once had. So I'm not going to say, guys, if you're a huge Jak and Daxter fan, I'm not going to say that this is a franchise that will never come back, because I think that there's a chance. I just don't think it's with Naughty Dog. I think Naughty Dog needs to sell the IP or let another developer kind of take the reins here and do like a soft reboot or something of that nature, because I think Naughty Dog, they're moving on to greener pastures. They want to move on, into probably a full-blown trilogy of The Last of Us, maybe even more than that, and do other projects as well. Jak and Daxter was in their past. Not that it, not that they would never revisit it, but I think if they did, it would be like more of like a remaster or something along those lines. I just think that Jak and Daxter is primed to be, remastered first of all, but also continued, and give a shot to a indie developer that really is passionate about a project like this. Give them a shot at making something really special, and I think they could. I think that this was a series that had an identity crisis throughout the course of its history, guys. Even though it was unique, each one was unique to itself. I think there were problems with this franchise because there were times where I would almost didn't even really realize like how many games there were in this franchise when these games were coming out. There was like Jak and Daxter, then there was Jak, and then, then there, of course, the racing, and there was just a lot of different games that were coming out in this franchise that it kind of got convoluted and a little bit confusing, I think, for some people. And so if they were to continue, they should just call it Jak and Daxter, first of all. But second of all, do a remaster, get people back introduced to this franchise, and then go ahead and move forward from there. But let me know what you guys think. What would you guys want to see in a Jak and Daxter continuation? Would you guys want to see it, or do you think it should be left alone? Let me know in the comment section below. And for more Jak and Daxter content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.